Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
The affair was meticulously calculated, almost chilling in its precision. Every step she took seemed designed to avoid detection. She handled all her communications through outside channels. Emails were sent from a cybercafe during her lunch breaks, using a fresh email account each time. She kept a disposable cell phone hidden in her desk at work, and a bag of clothes stashed in a locker at the gym where she regularly worked out, the same gym she'd frequented since the day we met. To cover her tracks even further, she convinced her lover to rent a car for her. This way, the mileage on her vehicle remained unchanged. No GPS tracker could reveal unusual movements, and there was no paper trail linking her to anything suspicious. She was careful not to give her lover our home phone number, maintaining a safe distance even in their clandestine arrangement. Her routine remained as steady as ever, workouts 3 evenings a week, just as she'd been doing for the past 5 years. But the gym, with its 2 parking lots, one in the front and one in the back, became part of her ruse. She'd park her car in the front lot, walk in as usual, and then slip out the back to her rental car, heading to meet him. At his place, she kept a stash of clothes, ensuring she always returned home in the exact same outfit she had left in. No telltale stains on her underwear, no misplaced lingerie, nothing for me to stumble upon. It was a flawless, calculated deception, until it wasn't. So, with all these precautions, you may be wondering how I found out? Simple. Somebody told me, and, most ironical of all, it was her lover who did it. My name is Nate Harris, and I met Lila Monroe 3 years ago at a bus stop of all places. That's what's so funny about this whole thing, you see. I met her at a bus stop, and I found out about her affair on a bus. How's that for vicious irony? Well, anyway, I was standing there waiting for the 14 when this absolutely gorgeous creature comes pelting up the sidewalk, hair flying behind her with an oak leaf caught in it, and she says, "I didn't miss the 14, did I?" "No, you still got lots of time," I said back, pretending not to ogle her. "Oh, good. I just moved here, and I don't have a handle on everything yet," she said, brushing a strand of hair off one flushed cheek. "I'm Lila. Who are you?" I introduced myself, and by the time the bus showed up in a roar of dragon's breath, we had a date for lunch. The doors hissed shut behind us, and we ended up sitting on opposite ends of the bus because of the number of occupied seats. I went to work, called the garage where my car was being worked on my reason for being on the bus in the first place, and they told me that I wouldn't have it back for 3 more days. I sighed and got to work. We met for lunch that day, and the rest of the week. She had moved here to Vancouver from California, just one of many Californians who had begun to infiltrate the PNW like a plague. They came here to get away from the hideously expensive cost of living and the bad traffic, but brought those same things up here, ruining the way of life for the rest of us. I didn't hold her California roots against her, though. She was a delightful conversationalist and damned easy on the eyes. And she was scary smart too, as I was to discover. She was a programmer teaching classes over at the community college, and she also owned a small company which did some freelance work for some of the big technical firms here and in Portland. Some kind of outsourcing thing I never really got a handle on, since I'm no geek. Like I said, scary smart girl. But she wasn't one of those snotty smart ones. You know the kind I mean. They have to rub your nose in how smart they are by spouting esoteric mathematical formulas at the dinner table and look at you funny when you don't get it. Stuff like that. Lila wasn't like that. She was an ordinary girl, but with a brain, and I really liked it. I was a mere sales manager, but she didn't look down on me because of that. I was only average on the intelligence scale, but I could talk about a lot of things with a fair degree of acumen. In short, we had a lot going for us. When we finally made love, it was different than my previous experiences too. Those people who say sex and love can be different sure had it right. Up to that point, I had met a few bar girls, and sex with them was something like having a single Oreo cookie, if you know what I mean. Good, but not all that fulfilling or exciting. With Lila, sex was like having a 4-course meal and dessert and espresso. In short, it was wonderful. I proposed 3 months after our initial meeting at that bus stop, and we moved in together. We had an October wedding amidst the fall leaves, and we toasted each other with mugs of hot cider instead of champagne. I don't want to give you the idea that our marriage was perfect as a fairy tale, because it wasn't. Some people may think that I am henpecked, but I'm really not. The thing is, I think that Lila thought I was, and that is why she did what she did. She thought I'd let her do her thing and not complain. I guess that maybe I did contribute to her way of thinking a bit. When we got our house, I did not contribute much in the way of ideas for decoration. I just let Lila do her thing, and that is because I just didn't care about stuff like that. If she had come to me and said, "Nate dear, I want to paint the dining room purple with a green stripe across the ceiling," I would have said, "Yes, dear," and kept on doing what I was doing. She picked the cars we drove, and I was fine with that too. because the ones she did pick worked well and had good mileage and safety ratings. All I cared about was that it got me from point A to point B without breaking down too often. I got my way on the things that mattered to me. I wanted a cloth recliner instead of a leather one. So when Lila brought home a leather one, I didn't say anything but took it back and got it replaced with a cloth one. I wanted a Motorola cell phone, and she wanted a Nokia. I got the Motorola. Both those occasions got me cut off for 2 days because I didn't do what she wanted. I responded by cutting her off for 3. I never understood why she did that since she liked sex as much as I did. But hey, whatever turned her crank. After a while, she got the idea and stopped using sex as a bribe/weapon. So yeah, most of the time I let her have her way, because as I said most of the time, I just didn't give a damn about the issue in question. If that makes me henpecked, so be it, but I didn't see it that way. Why put up a fight just for the sake of it? Fast forward 3 years. My car was once again in the shop, and I was taking the bus over to the mall to do some Christmas shopping. I was sitting there making mental lists of our relatives and trying to decide what to get each one when I heard, "Hi there, Lila. I'm looking forward to our next meeting." Pause. Lunch tomorrow? Uh-huh, right? Yeah, I bet it was me too, babe. Hubby still not got a clue yet? Yeah, well, he's a chicken and no doubt about it. By this time you can be sure I was paying real close attention. Lila isn't all that common a name, after all, and so, judging by the one-sided conversation I was listening to, she was screwing some creepy, scruffy-looking guy behind my back. I mean, the guy was seriously a bum, by appearances. Long, greasy-looking hair that looked to be falling out haphazardly, chewed fingernails, scruffy face that looked as though it hadn't seen a razor since the first Clinton administration. What did my classy wife see in this a-hole, if it was indeed my classy wife? They had hung up, agreeing on the Mongolian grill out by the mall as their next rendezvous spot. They could be a little less discreet, since as far as Lila knew, I would be heading up to Seattle tomorrow. I hadn't had a chance to tell her yet that the client had rescheduled for next week, and now all of a sudden, I didn't have such a burning need to let her know either. My original plan had been to surprise her with dinner at the Outback, which was, oddly enough, right by the Mongolian grill, and then take her home to screw her silly. Now I had serious doubts cast upon the solidity of our marriage, doubts caused by an overheard conversation on a bus, and I wasn't in any hurry to get home now. I got off the bus at the mall and wandered through, seeing but not appreciated the gaudy Christmas banners or hearing the canned Christmas carols piped in through the overhead speakers. I thought we had a great marriage. I thought it was something that was going to last forever. But then, maybe I didn't. I was ready, instantly, to believe that my wife was stepping out on me, just by hearing the name Lila on a bus. Did that mean I was an insecure, jealous jerk? Maybe so, but I honestly wasn't expecting anything like this to happen. I sat on a bench watching the fountain in the middle of the mall and examined my feelings. That guy on the bus was but ugly, no doubt about it. But maybe he had monster meat, or maybe he was filthy rich. Let's face it, I was only a sales manager, and I didn't really want to be much higher on the food chain than I already was. Maybe that was the appeal. Maybe this guy dazzled her with lots of money, and she saw the chance to trade up. Did that mean I could expect a divorce decree in the near future? Get a grip, I told myself sternly. I was beating myself over nothing but possibilities and getting nowhere. First thing I had to do was find out exactly what the hell was going on. I called Lila and told her I had to work late in preparation for the meeting tomorrow, and then I called Henry Mansfield, our company attorney. "Nate, you old scumsucker," Henry boomed. "How's you and that pretty little wife of yours?" Henry was one of those big guys who didn't have any concept of what my mother used to call an indoor voice. Whether he was dining a client or talking on the phone, he was always loud and booming. I sometimes amused myself with inventing soliloquies he might use in that booming voice of his while making love to his wife. "That's what I'm calling about, Hank," I said. "I think she might be stepping out on me." I had no problem telling him this, since anything I said would be protected under client confidentiality. "You gotta be shitting me," Henry roared, making me wince and pull the phone away from my ear. "You're crazy, Nate. The hell gave you that idea?" So, I told him about what I'd heard on the bus, and I told him I wanted to know if there was a good PI he could recommend to me so that I could find out the truth. I couldn't be the cliché husband and take time off work to follow her around. I needed the income. "Well, I could try and convince you that you're insane. That woman would no more step out on you than Elvis would come back to life and dance on the roof of the Empire State Building. But I know it'll eat at you until you know I'm right. So, I know a guy, Jim Richardson, best PI in the county. Give him a call in about half an hour. I'll smooth the way for you." "Thanks, Hank," I said, jotting down the number he gave me. "I hope to God you're right and I'm just tilting at windmills, but I got to know." "I understand. Buddy, go put them fears to rest. I said goodbye to him and decided that I couldn't do Christmas shopping in the frame of mind I was in just then. I did make one stop at the Radio Shack on the second level and purchased 3 voice-activated recorders. They were small enough to fit in my pocket, and I decided to keep them in my basement workshop for the moment. My wife was a very smart girl, and I didn't think she would say anything in the house that would give me a clue, but damn it, I had to do something. I would set them up the next time she was gone and hope to hell that I had wasted my money. I called Richardson while I was waiting for the bus home, and he gave me an appointment at 4 the next afternoon. The prices he gave me over the phone made me gasp for breath, but peace of mind was priceless. Things were normal as I could make them that night. I explained my tense mood by mentioning some problems at work, and Lila offered me a back massage and a nice dinner to take my mind off things. I gritted my teeth and bore it. I couldn't stand all the suspicion. It was like a bad case of heartburn, eating away at me. Was she, or wasn't she? Did she, or did she not? Did she ever love me? I couldn't ask her about it. Hey, are you having an affair? Like, who ever really answers that question honestly? Nevertheless, I think I did a fair job of acting like everything was okay. We went to bed and there was no sex. It only just occurred to me that there really hadn't been much for the past 3 months or so. More evidence. The next morning, I got a passionate kiss and a hurry-home lover from my wife as I headed out the door to the bus stop. I wasn't sure, but it didn't seem like she was faking. That was one more thing I had to worry about. How could she act the loving wife to me and still screw somebody else? The day passed pretty normally for me. I was able to shove most of my worries to the back of my mind and do the job they paid me to do. I took a client to lunch and signed a contract, got a congratulations from my boss, and went to see Richardson after being dismissed early. I gave him Lila's schedule, a photograph, and a check, and he told me that he'd give me a call in a week to discuss what he found out. Meanwhile, I was going to do some work on my own. I went to the drugstore, got a ball cap and a disposable camera, and set off for the Mongolian Grill. Their rendezvous was set for 6, and I was supposed to be out of town, so they had no reason to suspect being followed. I got to the restaurant at about 6:15, and sure enough, there they were, my loving wife and the bum from the bus yesterday, sitting at a table with bowls of rice and veggies in front of them, holding hands and feeding each other bits of broccoli. It was something out of a bad romance book, and it told me that their little meetings were far more than just sex sessions. This was a full-blown love affair. She smiled and laughed with him, and gave him little touches that only a woman in love gives to a man. And it tore my heart out. I couldn't go in there just yet, though. I needed more information, and if I had gone in, they would have seen me. So, all I could do was stand outside and snap pictures through the window as they humiliated me. After 10 minutes I had enough, both in terms of pictures and seeing them together. I was starting to get mad. Real mad? How dare she do this to me? It wasn't reasonable maybe, not in this modern age where cheating is almost as casual a thing as getting new shoes, but it meant something to me. She was obviously giving the affection that I thought only belonged to me away to somebody else, and I was pissed off about it. I took a cab to the Super 8 hotel and paced around the room, fuming. I couldn't go home because I was supposed to be out of town. I couldn't call Lila because I didn't trust myself not to start screaming at her. I considered and rejected the idea of getting drunk. That would only leave me with a hangover and not solve anything. I pulled out my laptop and distracted myself with the usual financial stuff. I transferred half of our joint savings account into my own account that I'd had before we got married. We didn't have any CDs or investments, so I didn't have to mess with those, and our joint checking account didn't have enough of a balance to bother splitting, so that got left alone. The house was a rental. Our savings account was actually our down payment fund for our own house, so that wasn't an issue either. From a purely financial standpoint, a divorce would be a slam dunk, and that was depressing all by itself. Eventually, I drifted into a troubled sleep on the dingy hotel mattress, the usual questions rolling around my head like bowling balls. Why did she do it? Was I not good enough for her? What did I do wrong? And all that other stuff. I had nightmares about her riding a man in an open field while I was held back by big rubber bands, and she just looked over and laughed at me. I woke up in a cold sweat, got into the shower, and stood there for 20 minutes trying to get myself back under control. I had to go back home tonight and pretend that everything was still okay. I was a salesman, and this would be the biggest selling job of my whole life. It took a week. A whole week of pretending like nothing was wrong and of telling Lila that I loved her and listening to her lie as she told me the same. When I got to the office a week after I gave Richardson the check, there was a message asking me to call him. I got hold of Richardson, and he said that I could come in at 4 again, and that in the meantime he would try to get more info. I told him to keep at it until the check I gave him ran out. Any leverage I could get would be used in the divorce. In the meantime, I set up the voice-activated tape recorders. I had one in the house, one in her purse and another in her car. I was absolutely correct when I thought that she wouldn't say anything in the house, because during the whole week I got nothing at all on the recorders that shouldn't be there. So the morning I heard from Richardson, I took them all out before I left for work. Around lunchtime, I called Lila and asked if she would like to go out to dinner that night, to which she agreed enthusiastically, and we exchanged love yous and hung up. I asked for and was given the rest of the afternoon off, and I went to my house and started packing my shit. I didn't really care what her reasons were. I wanted out. She was obviously lying to me, and I wanted no part of it. I left her all the furniture and only took my computer. She had her own my clothes and some family heirlooms that I had inherited. Just enough stuff to fill the trunk and the back seat of my Volvo. I went back to the Super 8 and reserved a room for a couple of weeks, during which time I would hit Craigslist and try to find me an apartment. By the time I had done all that stuff, it was almost 3. I went to see Richardson, and the bottom fell out of my world. That evening around 6, I met Lila at the Outback by the mall. She did a fine job of pretending to be the loving wife, smothering me in kisses. I had to make a Herculean effort not to barf, wondering if that mouth had been used that afternoon. "You had better eat up, lover," she told me as we settled in a booth. "You've left me deprived for 2 days, and I need to play catch-up." "I'll just bet you have," I thought, but I only smiled and said, "Don't worry, you'll get all the loving you can handle." She beamed at me, and we ordered our dinner. I was never one for playing games, and so while we sipped our after-dinner coffee, I came right out with it. "Lila." "Yes, dear." "Who is Ethan Hayes?" Lila dropped her coffee cup.
How?
"Never mind how. Who is Ethan Hayes?" She stared at me for a moment, mouth working, and then something changed in her eyes. I don't know what it was. Maybe resolve. Maybe it was an "oh well, he knows now. Might as well get it over with." "Look, Ethan is my ex-boyfriend, and I've been seeing him for a while now." "How long is a while, Lila?" It was an effort to keep my voice steady, but I managed. "About 3 months." "How did you find out?" "Doesn't matter, Lila." "Why? Why did you feel the need to stab me in the back?" "It was never about you, Nate. You have to know that." I was surprised at how calm she was all of a sudden. "Then explain to me what it was all about." "Why don't you?" "I'd rather not. Let's just leave it at that. It was never about you and has nothing to do with you." "No, Lila, I'm not going to be satisfied with that. I've already packed up all my stuff, and the only thing left is to get the lawyers involved. So why don't you just unburden yourself?" Confession is good for the soul. For the first time since I mentioned Hayes' name, I think I rocked her. "Why did you do that? There's no need for you to move out. There's no need to get the lawyers involved. I love you and you know I do." "Oh, I don't know," I said sarcastically. Something about living with a lying, cheating bitch upsets me for some reason. She winced. "Must you be so crude? Must you screw other guys behind my back?" "It hasn't been other guys, only Ethan. It doesn't matter if he was the only one or one of many. The first time you invited another man into your body, the one you promised to me during our wedding ceremony, it was over for us. Now," I leaned across the table and got in her face, "why are you screwing that man?" She stared at me. I had never gotten in her face like that before. As I said, I think that because I let her do her own thing most of the time, she figured that I would let her do this too, and it came as a shock to her that I was coming down so hard on her. She sighed and looked away. I couldn't swear to it, but I thought I saw a tear in her eye. "Ethan was my boyfriend all through high school," she said at last in a low voice. "During our senior year, we were talking about marriage. We were going to go to UCLA together and take the software world by storm. Only problem was Ethan's father was an Army officer stationed down at Fort Irwin. And so halfway through our senior year, he moved and we never got closure. The letters stopped after a couple of months, and up until a few months ago, I never heard from him again." She stopped there and looked at me. I kept a blank face on, but inside I was fuming. So she ran into her old high school boyfriend. Big deal. She was still married to me, and that was no goddamn excuse to screw him. "Go on, Lila," I said in a neutral voice. She stared at me for a minute, then continued in a lower voice. "Well, like I said, he found me at work one day about 3 months ago, and it was like old times. He asked me to lunch, and it was like we never were apart. The fact that I was a married woman didn't really sink in until we had sex for the first time. I realized I had to keep you from finding out, because I really do love you, Nate, and I didn't want you to leave me. No, what you wanted was to have your cake and eat it too, Lila. You didn't love me. You loved being able to put one over on me. Just what did a-hole say to you to get you to spread for him?" "I know it had to be something." She sobbed once, then quickly got herself together. "Don't talk about him like that, Nate. He's not an a-hole." "Of course he is. Any man that deliberately goes after a married woman is an a-hole. Now, just what did he tell you that got you to spread for him?" I'm dying to know. He told me that he had cancer and that he wanted to make love to me one last time before he had to go into the hospice. I just couldn't deny him, Nate, especially after all that we had meant to each other. I of course knew this, but I also knew something else. So, you decided to keep on doing it for 3 months? Just to grant a dying man's last wish? She didn't answer, just kept staring at the table. Why? Why did you keep seeing him for 3 months? I couldn't bring myself to tell him no. He was dying, and if I could bring him some happiness before the end, how could I deny him? I couldn't help it. I started to laugh. I threw my head back and howled, while diners looked at me and Lila stared in shock. Finally, I got myself under control, waved an apology to the diners, who went back to their plates and stared at Lila. So, does this mean, I said, that, should I decide to stay married to you, I can look forward to you screwing anybody with a terminal illness? Suppose a guy came up to you and said that he was dying of AIDS and his last wish was to screw you? You gonna let him? She flared up angrily. How could you suggest such a thing? I'm not that gullible or stupid. Yes, you are, Lila. You are indeed, because that is what happened with A-hole. He said he was dying and he wanted to screw you. But that's different. No, it isn't. I don't give a damn if he was your old high school boyfriend or the goddamn reincarnation of Casanova. You are still a married woman, and you shouldn't have been screwing anybody else, terminal illness or not. You are indeed that gullible. But I loved him. If you loved him that much, you shouldn't have married me. There is no room in my marriage for a third party, so that means that we need a divorce. I don't care what your excuses are. You still cheated and lied and turned me into a cuck. How many times did you come home fresh from your lover and give me sloppy seconds? How many times did you feed me his leftovers when I ate you out? And oh, Lila, there is no room for a third party here. No, Nate, no. I never did any of that stuff, and I won't let you have a divorce. You have no evidence, and if you bring up what we talked about tonight, I'll just deny it. Have it your way, Lila. I'll see you sometime, I said, as I got up and left her sitting there. Lila did fight the divorce. She found herself an attorney and started throwing up roadblocks, claiming I was hiding bonuses and commission checks. I filed under the grounds of infidelity, and she was bound and determined to fight me all the way. 3 months later, we had our court date, and I told the judge that she had been cheating on me with a guy named Ethan Hayes. Her lawyer said that I had no evidence, and that she furthermore denied that any infidelity had happened at all. It was time to play my ace. Jim Richardson had earned every cent of his fee. He had used a 400mm lens to take pictures of Lila's computer screen at the cybercafe from across the street, and I could read her emails as she set up her next rendezvous with A-hole. Since it was a public place, those photos were admissible. Next was the shots of her going into the gym and out the back door to climb into a rental car, which was later shown to be rented by Ethan Hayes. And last on the visual exhibits, there were photos of Lila and this Hayes character kissing in front of a hotel room before walking in and coming out 2 hours later by the photographic timestamp. Finally, there was the story Lila told me on one of the voice-activated tape recorders I had bought. It was in my pocket the night of our last dinner together. Her lawyer threw up an objection that since it was recorded without Lila's knowledge, it should be inadmissible, but I countered and said I was recording myself and she just happened to be there. It was a stupid, flimsy objection, but the judge let the recording be admitted. All the fight went out of Lila then, and the judge found in my favor. Lila had to pay her own court costs and attorney's fees, and I didn't have to pay her alimony since she made more than I did. I shook my lawyer's hand and headed over to Lila's table, where she was sitting, head on her arms as she cried quietly. There's one more thing you should know, Lila darling, I said mockingly. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. What now? You a-hole? I had to smile at that. She screwed away her marriage and I'm the scumsucker. How rich. Just this, I said, handing her a sheet of paper. It was an audio transcript that had been obtained illegally and was thus not admissible in court between Ethan Hayes and his friend Jack. I did it, man. Got Lila to put out. How'd you do that? I told her I had cancer. I cut my hair patchy-like, and I put on some makeup to make my face look a little paler. Every couple of weeks I cut a little more hair out until I told her I was about to go into the hospice. But you really don't have cancer, right? And no, hell no. I only did it because her company screwed mine out of a programming deal. I knew her in high school, but she was always a frigid bitch, and this was a fun way to get back at her. Wow, that sure showed her, didn't it? Good job. Lila looked up from the papers. You made this up, you son of a bitch. I know it. Ethan wouldn't do that to me. I let out a dry laugh. No, my darling ex-wife, I didn't make any of it up. Nothing I could ever do to you would be more satisfying than watching you destroy yourself. I hope he was worth it. Have a nice life, I said, my tone sharp and final. With that, I turned and walked out of the courtroom, the sound of Lila's sobs echoing behind me as I stepped into the sunlight, free at last. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.